3 full hours. Sundays starting at 2, 1 Central.
It's a 3-hour tour on me.
Our Democrats, 149 Democrats, 2 Republicans, 141 now Republicans voting against this resolution. Ryan Nobles, you're our congressional correspondent. Do we know who the second Republican is yet?
No, we don't. We're trying to figure that out right now. We have our colleagues inside the House gallery to try and figure that out. Sometimes it's the votes come in so rapidly that they don't necessarily line up on the tote board as quickly as they're cast. But we are, looking at the names of certain members of Congress. That list of 10 members who voted to impeach President Trump. They're among those that we're tracking. We're also, tracking people that have been specifically critical of Marjorie Taylor Greene during all of this. Wolf, I think what's interesting, and we haven't really talked about it yet today during this conversation, is the juxtaposition by what we're seeing now as opposed to what we saw last night, right? So we've kind of framed this story as Liz Cheney, the number 3 ranking Republican who was under fire by the pro-Trump wing of the party because of her impeachment vote. She was on the verge of being removed from her leadership post. And last night, in a secret ballot, she comfortably held on to that position. Now here we are today in a situation where a pro-Trump member of Congress, Marjorie Taylor Greene, under fire by Democrats, and her Republican colleagues are largely rushing to her defense. And so that means there's going to be a significant number of Republicans who voted for Liz Cheney and are also going to vote to support Marjorie Taylor Greene. And the biggest difference between these 2 votes is that one was secret and one is public. And you have to wonder.
Interesting, though, barely a mention today from President Biden of Iran or its nuclear policy. Brett?
Was noticeable. Kristen Fisher live on the North Lawn. Kristen, thanks. At the bottom of the hour, we will look at whether President Biden is living up to his pledge to be tough on Russia. Rich Edson at the State Department. Up next, a check on Super Bowl security and how the game may shape the way big events happen in the future.
Guys to see us, and we want to let everybody know we see them.
Welcome back to The Beat with Ari Melber. We are in the middle of special coverage, watching and tracking this scene you see here, 6:25 p.m. in the Capitol, and the House voting on agreeing to a resolution that would strip Rep. Greene from her committee powers, a major rebuke and an effort to provide actual sanction and punishment, given much of what we've been reporting on, her conspiracy theories and her public advocacy of violence. All of this, of course, is in the backdrop of much that she has documented herself and that's been documented in her public remarks. Videos surfaced, for example, of Taylor Greene harassing Parkland shooting survivor David Hogg, who has become a gun control activist. What you are about to see is this video that occurred before she was elected to Congress.
If a resource officer at Parkland had done his job, then Nicholas Cruz wouldn't have killed anybody in your high school. How did you get over 30 appointments with senators? How'd you do that? School zones were protected with security guards with guns. There would be no mass shootings. But yet you're attacking our Second Amendment. And you have nothing to say.
We're joined now by David Hogg, who is the Parkland shooting survivor. He's also the co-founder of March for Our Lives. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I'll start with a bit of a half apology. I'm sorry that the conditions are such that we're partly talking about this, not your other work and your other advocacy, which of course you've spoken out on and been on MSNBC about. And yet I think you'd agree, and I know you agreed to the interview, that it's newsworthy because it goes to the evidence that the Congress is considering today and taking this, what is a severe measure. Your thoughts tonight?
Yeah, I think it's important that there's accountability here. I understand that there's criticism, for example, where Republicans say this is a slippery slope, that they would possibly do the same in the future when they have a majority. But I'll tell you what the real slippery slope is here, in my opinion, is a sitting congresswoman who has repeatedly violated federal law, mind you, by threatening to assassinate the Speaker of the House. It's not like there's no precedent for this. Elected officials there is a history of elected officials shooting and killing other elected officials throughout U.S. history. This is a very serious matter. This is not just like they had some opinion that we didn't agree with. This is about literally the safety of our democracy and the people that work within it. And I'm glad that there's some form of accountability here, although I would prefer that they resign. And we're actually working on that right now. And if people would like to help support our petition that's gotten over 250,000 signatures for that, they can text resign to 954-954. Again, they can text resign to 954-954.
How did you come to learn about her during a little bit of the interaction we just showed? And what did you think or feel, if you'll share with us, when you saw that she was not only a candidate, but a rising one, getting the nomination and then winning?
I don't even know what to say with that. You know, for a while, I was just trying to block it out. I try not to think about those people because she is certainly not the only person that has done that. There have been many people that have reported me in that manner. It's just this time that they got elected to Congress. And frankly, when that video was being taken, for example, what I was thinking about wasn't so much myself, it was the safety of my staff and friends that I was around. You know, there was this woman chasing us. Many of the people that I worked with, myself, of course, were about 18 years old or 19 years old at the time. There's a woman chasing us, essentially threatening us with a gun, you know, for advocating for gun control. And, you know, say what you want. You may not agree with me on everything, but there is nothing that can justify threatening people that are just barely older than, you know, minors with a gun because you don't agree with them in the first place. It's just fundamentally wrong. And ultimately, it's just unfortunate, really, because I want to see bipartisan action around gun violence. Bullets don't discriminate. People are dying in red states and blue states across the country, and we're, you know, every state is bleeding out at this point. And I want to see bipartisan action, but when people like Marjorie Taylor Greene do stuff like that, it makes it incredibly hard. But I will say I'm thankful to Republicans like my father that have spoken out and, you know, have resigned from the Republican Party in disgust because they realize that, you know, kids like I was at the time of the shooting deserve more protection. Than a weapon like the AR-15.
And
Tonight, former President Donald Trump is called to testify before Congress in his own impeachment trial. The breaking news, his lawyers say, no way. The dramatic turn in Trump's second impeachment trial, why Democrats want Trump under oath, and the House votes to punish Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene for her extreme conspiracy theories. What she's saying tonight. Breaking news, Johnson & Johnson asked the FDA for emergency approval, the next step towards getting a third coronavirus vaccine here in the U.S. New variants, new fears. Even with declining rates of new COVID infections, the concern that the virus is mutating faster than the U.S. can vaccinate Americans. When will you see a $1,400 check? The new reporting tonight on those stimulus payments, including who would be eligible. Charged with murder. A former Columbus police officer faces prosecution for shooting an unarmed black man. Tainted baby food. The new government report finds dangerous levels of arsenic and lead. What you need to know tonight to protect your family. Women and the pandemic. With so many women leaving the workforce, the out-of-the-box plan to pay mothers for taking care of their children. iPhone danger. Apple issues a new warning to iPhone 12 users that their phone might interfere with a pacemaker. And superheroes at the Super Bowl. The frontline healthcare workers heading to the big game.
This is the CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell, reporting from the nation's capital.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. We're going to begin with breaking news on two major stories tonight. As we come on the air, Johnson & Johnson has officially asked the FDA for emergency approval of its new vaccine, which only requires a single dose.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is World News Tonight with David Muir.
Good evening, and it's great to have you with us here on a Thursday night. That vote playing out on Capitol Hill on that embattled Congresswoman, and we'll go live to the Hill in just a moment here. But we're going to begin tonight with the other breaking news just as we come on. Johnson & Johnson just moments ago requesting emergency use authorization for their single-shot vaccine. And you'll remember our reporting right here that this would be significant because it's a single dose only, 85% effective at preventing severe symptoms, and they say 100% effective at preventing hospitalizations and death. The U.S. now with more than 455,000 American lives lost, the country averaging more than 3,300 deaths per day. This potential new weapon could help get the vaccines out more quickly, not only because it would be the third vaccine, but obviously because this only requires one shot. And even with the encouraging news tonight that the U.S. infection rate is dropping, authorities remain concerned about what could happen when the UK variant could become the dominant strain here in the U.S. in weeks, and of course concern over other variants as well. The head of the CDC now saying that they have increased the sequencing. That's what the scientists need to do to track the mutations, the variants here in the U.S. The hope is, of course, to get enough Americans vaccinated to halt or significantly slow down these variants. It remains a race against time tonight, and the late news on this newest weapon, ABC's Whit Johnson leading us off.
A third vaccine on the verge of joining America's arsenal. Tonight, Johnson & Johnson applying for emergency use authorization for its single-dose vaccine. Just one shot shown to be 100% effective at preventing hospitalizations and deaths. The race to vaccinate now also a race against new COVID variants.
We have to get a lot of people, especially high-risk elderly people, vaccinated before these variants take hold. That's going to happen over the next 6 to 8 weeks.
Today, in a new study in the UK, some participants will be given one dose of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and then weeks later, a different vaccine from Pfizer to test the effectiveness of mixing vaccines. But for now, U.S. health officials still urging people to stick with the recommended doses and timeline.
That it is okay if you get the second dose in either 4 to 6 weeks later. That doesn't mean that we want to do it at 6 weeks later. It means that under special circumstances, it's better to delay that couple of weeks than not do it at all.
Carol worked the phones for hours to schedule her second dose.
So finally getting your second dose, it must be quite a relief.
Yes, it's like the golden ticket in Willy Wonka.
This mass vaccination site in Jones Beach, New York is still getting back up and running after that huge snowstorm. You can see the line of cars stretching down the parkway, more than 1,500 appointments scheduled for today alone.
And tomorrow, famed Yankees Stadium opening its gates to vaccinate thousands as New York State ramps up efforts to reach underserved communities.
COVID is killing black and brown people at a rate of 3 times. It is killing other people.
Our Kenneth Moten is in the Bronx.
You guys are literally knocking on the doors of the people and then getting them to come here, bringing the vaccine to them.
We knocked on easily probably 500 to 600 doors, signed up 100, 150 people, literally at the doors.
The state also opening up 35 pop-up vaccination sites. At this one, open for just 2 days, 500 time slots.
For what purpose does the gentlelady from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, as the member designated by Ms. Axney pursuant to H-Res 8, I inform the House that Ms. Axney will vote yes on H-Res 72.
Trump fringe of the Republican Party. The Trump party is Marjorie Taylor Greene and vice versa. I mean, Wolf, one of the things that needs to be said about Marjorie Taylor Greene is how she did not sound apologetic at all today. She was very Trumpian in the way she was talking about all of this, you know, portraying herself as the victim, as if, you know, she is the one who's been unfairly treated in all of this. Never mind the fact, Wolf, if you go through her social media posts, and I was looking at what she's posted on Instagram, a lot of that has not been scrubbed. A lot of these offensive comments that she's made, these conspiratorial comments, are still there in her social media accounts. And so, you know, I think that she's basically put the Democrats in a position where some accountability has to be had. I mean, obviously the Republican Party is not going to clean its own house here when it comes to dealing with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and the Democrats have to do something. Wolf, you and I both know, I've seen you have been posting about this. It has concerned me a great deal as well. When you drive around Washington, D.C., and see how it has been turned into a fortress. This fencing with armed members of the National Guard standing at their posts, guarding our Congress, guarding other federal office buildings, guarding the White House. All of this has been turned upside down because of people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, and like former President Trump, who are clinging to this big lie that he won the election, that he was cheated out of the election. And it is just high time for this country to get away from this fringe conspiracy theory nonsense. It doesn't sound like Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to do any of that. And so what can the Democrats do at this point other than the actions that they're taking right now? I mean, it sort of, defies, what everybody believes to be normal in this city, that there should be, a simple facts and truths that we could all turn to when it comes to just dealing with the problems with this country. And Donald Trump is make no mistake, Donald Trump is sitting down in Mar-a-Lago right now watching all of this unfold. I've talked to sources over the last couple of days who have said that Trump has been talking to members of Congress up on Capitol Hill, lobbying members of Congress on how to deal with Marjorie Taylor Greene and how to go after Liz Cheney. He's very much involved in all of this still, Wolf, despite the fact that he's locked out of his social media accounts and kicked out of the White House.
Because with Core Trust,
I do not support it.
Today, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi declaring that since Republicans won't take action against Greene, the full House would.
You would think that the Republican leadership in the Congress would have some sense of responsibility to this institution. If any of our members threatened us, other members, we'd be the first ones to take them off of the committee. That's it.
Pelosi saying that because Greene once implied that she should be executed. In the past, Republicans and Democrats have punished their own members for offenses. But since Republicans now refuse, for the first time in the modern era, the full House voting to strip committee assignments from a sitting member of Congress.
Yeah, this is really quite something. Rachel, back on the Hill tonight, the full House now voting just this evening. Congresswoman Greene today expressing some regret for her past statements, as you reported there, but no apology in front of the cameras.
David, no apology from Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene tonight. She says that she is being crucified in a public square. Democrats say she needs to be held accountable for her violent rhetoric, and that especially after the January 6th insurrection here at the Capitol, that Congress needs to send a message. David?
All right, Rachel Scott following this into the night. Rachel, thank you. And now to the Senate impeachment trial of former President Trump, just days from beginning. And tonight, Democrats have asked the former president to appear as a witness. And late today, the former president's response. So let's get right to our chief Washington correspondent, Jonathan Karl, back with us tonight. And John, why did the Democrats make this request? And the former president's response tonight, not entirely surprising.
Not a surprise, although, David, Donald Trump did float the idea of testifying privately to his aides just shortly after he was impeached. But both his legal team back then and his legal team now thought it would be a terrible idea. It is not happening. The House managers invited him to testify not because they thought he would accept, but they want to be able to say that they invited. They gave him a chance to testify. And in the letter of invitation that Jamie Raskin, the House manager, wrote to Donald Trump, he said that if he refuses to testify, quote, it would be a strong adverse inference regarding your actions on January 6th. In other words, if you refuse to testify, if you don't take up this opportunity, you are essentially admitting that you are guilty. David?
John Karl with us from Washington tonight. John, thank you.
Later.
Hands out to the side now!
A grand jury indicted Coy late yesterday on 4 charges: felony murder, felonious assault, and 2 counts of dereliction of duty. Coy will plead not guilty to all charges. His attorney, Mark Collins, says the former officer believed Hill was using his cell phone as a diversion and mistook Hill's set of keys in his other hand for a silver revolver.
Hey, don't get close, I can't see his hand.
He added that the two had interacted for a few minutes before the shooting.
He spoke to him once initially, and then he gave him some commands 2 other times which were ignored.
Can you elaborate on what transpired?
I can't go into the specifics at this point in time.
God bless all y'all out there.
47-year-old Hill lived with his daughter Carissa, who says the indictment news made her smile for the first time since December.
My dad was always in our life and my kids' life, and he was very hands-on. So he has a family that is always going to fight for him.
Adriana Diaz, CBS News. And tonight, a disturbing new government report says baby food from some of America's largest manufacturers is tainted with toxins that can cause permanent brain damage. The findings come from the company's internal documents. We get more now from CBS News consumer investigative correspondent Anna Werner.
The report says many baby foods have dangerous levels of toxic heavy metals, including arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury.
Chloe, you want more?
Something Connecticut mom Carrie Kerner never thought her one-year-old daughter Chloe might be eating.
That's the least thing a mother wants to think about. That's very concerning as a new mom.
Investigators said internal documents from 4 U.S. baby food manufacturers showed toxic metals in baby foods at levels higher than other products. When compared to government limits for bottled water, the results were up to 91 times the arsenic level, up to 177 times the lead level, and up to 69 times the cadmium level. UCSF professor Tracy Woodruff.
A baby who's eating this food can be exposed to multiples of these contaminants.
The majority of companies told us they're committed to safety, follow government rules and their own internal standards, and are working on voluntary proposals to limit metals. Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy says voluntary efforts aren't enough.
We need the FDA to step into the breach and do what I think the American people believe it is its job to do, which is to make sure that the food that their babies consume is safe.
The FDA says it's working on it, but acknowledges there's more work to be done. Anna Werner, CBS News, Berkeley, California.
And tonight, we're looking at a bold new plan to help mothers who are struggling financially during the pandemic. It calls for the federal government to pay moms up to $2,400 a month for their unpaid labor. We get the arguments for and against the idea in our series, Women and the Pandemic.
We're in a national crisis right now.
Reshma Sajani is the founder of the nonprofit company Girls Who Code and a mother of 2.
The reality is we are in a moment of rage. Every mother I know has just had it.
With many schools and daycares closed, more than 12 million women lost a job. Just over 2 million have left the workforce altogether.
We, in 9 months, lost 30 years of progress. Think about that.
So what do you think is the solution?
I think the solution is basic income for mothers.
It's part of what she calls the Marshall Plan for Moms, a reference to the program that helped rebuild Europe after World War II.
The Marshall Plan is what we think of when we want to build something from the bottom up, when we want to be bold.
Bold by calling for a short-term monthly stipend for moms who need it, along with paid family leave, affordable child care, and pay equity. The plan is endorsed by dozens of celebrities and business leaders, and they hope the Biden administration.
It's certainly an issue that Secretary Yellen, his economic team are focused on and will be looking for ways to help appease.
Not everyone thinks paying mothers is a good idea, including Betsy Stevenson, a member of President Obama's economic team.
Paying people to stay home is really encouraging something that could end up ultimately undermining the goals of having more equality in the home and having more equality in the workforce.
If you pay mothers who are home, does that discourage them from entering the workplace?
Absolutely not. It simply values their labor. We have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to fix things for the better once and for all.
And the debate will continue.
Take her off the committees. Your thoughts?
Right. Well, what you mean is the Democrats are voting to take her off this. Look, I think actually today was a pretty good day. Right. But they're overruling a decision. The Republican conference made a decision not to do this. I'm not sure the Democrats are playing a good hand here. I thought the Republicans did reasonably well today. They left Liz Cheney in her job, refused to dethrone her because she didn't vote the way other people wanted. And I thought they dealt with the new Congresswoman in this way. Look, this is part of an effort, I think, by the Democrats to portray all the Republicans as these crazy insurrectionist people. And I don't think that's true. I don't know where this stops. A lot of this was about stuff she said before she came in. I mean, I don't particularly care for her. But, if we're going to go after every nut in Congress, there's going to be a lot of empty seats.
Responsibilities, I totally agree. If someone shows you who they are, believe them. Now, today she tried to say, oh, I'm not that person, I'm someone else. Well, okay, if you want to submit that claim, we will receive it, but now you need to let your actions actually back up your words. We don't have to believe you today. We will watch you, and over the course of your 2-year term in Congress, prove it to us, and then your constituents can reelect you, and perhaps you can go back on committee. But you don't get to flip-flop and say one day I am A and one day I am B, and then we just take you at face value. You have to actually let your actions back up your words.
And actually, given your work with the Biden team, what do you think about the larger political wins we're seeing, which is, while everyone knows, I think, that Joe Biden wants things to be as bipartisan and unified as possible, and he certainly made that a centerpiece of the inaugural address, votes like today, which are largely party line, it's definitely a headline that 11 Republicans broke, but everyone can see 90% plus party, and the conference meeting that the Republicans held last night, yesterday, which we got reporting out of, doubling down on this, cheering her. All of this does cut against the idea that somehow there's going to be any new kumbayas anytime soon, because this has a lot of folks digging into party line votes. The Republicans themselves are complaining, whether people buy it or not, that the speaker making this such a priority is a political beginning to the new chapter.
I wish that there were more Republicans that had the courage to vote to strip her from her powers, but I gotta be honest, I'm not surprised that the vote is what it is. And so these will be the same people in a week or two that will hope that we forget what is happening right now, that we will forget what happens on January 6th, and ask us to forget that someone who has put out racist tropes, who has attacked and said terrible things, and put out threats toward elected officials, that we unify. I don't want to unify with someone who has that type of belief. Unity is that there is some type of alignment. I am not aligned with people who would put a...
Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Republican representative from Georgia, will now be barred from serving on the Education and Labor Committee as well as the Budget Committee. It's over. Let's see the final roll call. We'll see how many people actually voted in favor. We see Liz Cheney speaking right now. Let me just listen for a moment to see what she's saying.
House Resolution 95.
It is read.
Final reaction.
Well, I think that this was an important step for the country. It makes a clear statement that you can't say that 9/11 didn't take place. You can't say that believe in QAnon theories. You can't threaten violence against elected officials and still hope to serve in the United States Congress. There should be a very, very high bar from removing someone from committees, but this was not a hard call.
It certainly wasn't a hard call for the Democrats. Dana, it was a hard call for a lot of Republicans, although we did see a significant number of Republicans join with the Democrats and say this woman has no place on these committees.
That's right, including, according to a list that our colleague Manu Raju sent, a freshman, Nicole Maliatakis, who voted to remove her. So it is Marjorie Taylor Greene's fellow Republican freshman who apparently voted to remove her from these committees. She's from New York, and for the most part, except for a few others, most of them voted for the impeachment of the president as well. I should say, we're looking at those members, those Republican members, for lots of reasons, because they're in moderate districts, because they're in swing districts, because they, are at a certain place politically, or even for other reasons. But so they are very different votes. But it is interesting that there was some crossover, and then there was also not crossover. For example, Liz Cheney, who has been at the tip of the spear for so many of the members who were supportive of Donald Trump, she didn't vote to remove Marjorie Taylor Greene from her committees. And I haven't seen a statement from her, but no doubt she's a creature of the House. Her father served in the House. She's going to likely argue that it's bad precedent to do that, and it should be a party situation. Yeah,
the final vote, 230 in favor of removing Marjorie Taylor Greene from these committee assignments, 199 opposed. That's the final vote. And we did get the list of the Republicans who voted to remove her. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 11 representatives, Doug Jones, Republican representatives, joined with all the Democrats in voting to remove her. 11. In this particular case, they went against their party leadership. They decided this was a vote of conscience on their part, just like the 10 Republican representatives voted in favor of impeaching the former president. That was a vote of conscience for them as well. Give me your reaction, Doug.
This way up.
Managing and siding you can count on, all with a lifetime and protect your home.
6 months, 8 months, something along those lines. Give her an opportunity as a member of Congress to do the right things, to say the right things, to interact with her colleagues, and take the issues she needs to take, but also do it in a way that is respecting of your colleagues and respecting of the institution. But they didn't do that. They made it our way or the highway. This is what we stand for, and I think it'll backfire on them in the long run. I think this was a stand of principle on behalf of the Democrats and the 11 Republicans who voted to remove her from these committees.
Ryan Nobles, you spent a lot of time out there covering a lot of these candidates out there in these districts, and now you're our congressional correspondent. What's going to happen to these 11 Republicans, you think, by and large, when they go back to their own districts, and presumably they're going to seek re-election in 2 years?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting, Wolf, kind of the cross-section of members that you see taking the calculated risk of voting in favor of removing her from the committees, as opposed to those who chose not to. A number of members from upstate New York, for instance. You talk about Representative Malakatakis from Staten Island. That is a part of the country that was hit so dramatically by 9/11, right? I'm sure she and her family were probably watched the towers fall. And so the idea that, a fellow member of Congress would then come and suggest that 9/11 didn't happen, or that at least parts of 9/11 didn't happen, had to have touched her in a pretty dramatic way. I think there were some surprises with these 11 members that voted in favor of pulling her off of these committees. Keep in mind, Wolf, that there were only 10 Republicans that voted to impeach President Trump. So this, it's not a significant increase in that number, but it is an increase. And you have to wonder, and I do think that you see Republicans wrestling with this idea of what their future holds. And it's already really, you're starting to see that metamorphosis on the Senate side. Senator Mitch McConnell coming out strongly in favor of Liz Cheney and condemning Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene. You've seen a number of senators from very ruby red states, saying that they believe that her rhetoric was incorrect. And you have to wonder if, there's a difference between winning a Republican primary and winning an election, right? The best test case we have right now is the state that I spent 8 weeks in covering the Georgia Senate runoff. And you saw 2 Republican candidates who ran very close to President Trump, who refused to reject a lot of the conspiracy theories that he espoused about the election and the fraud that he claimed that was a part of it. And they ended up losing, and it really wasn't that close of a margin. The wins for the Democrats, they were pretty convincing in a state where Republicans have won for many, many years. So you have to wonder if that is in the back of the minds of these Republicans. And then, well, if there's maybe just a practical matter of conscience. This is a vote that's going to be on their record for the rest of their careers. And they're the ones that need to look each other in the mirror every day after they cast a vote like this.
Were you surprised?
Age, increasing your risk.
Congratulations!
His family, right there.
Oh,
Cow. And right here tonight, the high school graduate with his diploma.
Hey, David. It was a very emotional time for me for an 88-year-old man to accomplish his high school diploma. It's got to be a miracle. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
Vince proudly holding that diploma after a 70-year wait.
Hi, David.
His granddaughter, Krista.
It's something he's talked about his entire life. Hi, David.
And his great-granddaughter, Madison.
It was a great privilege to actually be able to see my great-grandpa graduate. It was pretty awesome.
We salute you, Vince. Your family loves you, and so do we. Good night.
This is Dakota News Now.
Good evening. I'm Kelsey Passel.
Very glad to have you with us here at 6 o'clock. I'm Brian Allen. The South Dakota State Legislature is taking up another bill related to transgender individuals here in the state.
The sponsors of HB 1217 say it's intended to promote continued fairness in women's sports and would change the process by which a transgender athlete could play in a sport outside of the sex they were born with. Austin Goss has been following that bill and joins us now live from the state capitol. Good evening, Austin.
Good evening, Kelsey and Brian. HB 1217 dropped yesterday and is the latest attempt by the South Dakota State Legislature to alter the way that the state deals with transgender athletes. However, the current SDHSAA director says that the current system works just fine. SDHSAA Executive Director Dan Swarto says that the current policy dealing with transgender athletes works well. It includes getting several letter of recommendations from the student-athlete supporters and a thorough in-house review process before they hand it off.
An attorney in Sioux Falls that's not connected to us any other way other than just to take these documents and look through them and make a determination if they meet our criteria.
Swarto
Arsenal against the virus, but unlike Pfizer's and Moderna's, this one only requires one shot. How soon could it receive the green light? The massive response to the video we first brought you, so many customers and employees unmasked inside a Florida store. Tonight, the growing outrage. Stunning rebuke, House Democrats holding a vote to punish Republican Marjorie Taylor Greene after her history of endorsing conspiracy theories and violence. Greene defending herself on the floor. House impeachment managers asking Donald Trump to testify under oath at his trial, how his lawyers are responding tonight. President Biden declaring America is back in his first foreign policy speech, his new warnings to Russia and China, and my one-on-one with his chief of staff. I asked, is there a plan to send masks to every American? The former officer caught on body cam fatally shooting an unarmed black man charged with murder. New reaction from Andre Hill's family. And vaccine hunters, how they're scoring doses that would otherwise go to waste.
This is NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening. We begin with late word that Johnson & Johnson has just applied to the FDA for emergency use authorization for its single-shot COVID vaccine. An approval soon could mean 100 million doses for use in this country by the start of summer. That news breaking at the same time we're seeing reason for cautious optimism about the direction of the COVID pandemic itself in this country. New infections and hospitalizations falling. The latest count shows there have been nearly 34 million vaccine doses administered, while there are more than 91,000 people currently hospitalized. Experts warning, however, that those more contagious virus mutations could spell plenty more dark days ahead. I spoke to White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain a while ago to get an update on efforts to speed up vaccinations. That's coming up, as well as an eye-opening follow-up to that now viral video we showed you last night of a Florida grocery store where there was not a mask in sight. Miguel Almaguer starts us off.
Tonight, Johnson & Johnson applying for emergency use authorization.
In Pierre, state lawmakers are introducing about a dozen bills concerning marijuana. Some of them have to do with regulating 2 voter-approved marijuana laws that go into effect on July 1st. Representative Mike Derby of Rapid City is spearheading a group called the Cannabis Caucus.
The Cannabis Caucus it's a loose affiliation of senators and House members, bipartisan. It's open to the public and lobbyists, so it's not really a true caucus.
Derby says the group is all about education and they are not crafting legislation. He has, however, proposed Bill 1225 and is approaching it from a business standpoint.
I've been in business my whole career. I've got some pillars that I'm working on. Number one, I want to make sure we generate as much revenue for the state of South Dakota as possible. Number two, I want to make sure we get rid of the black market as much as possible. And I'd like to utilize the framework of existing retailers or new retailers that handle adult use, age-appropriate products.
For example, alcohol and tobacco. Medical marijuana is supposed to go into effect July 1st of this summer. However, Derby says it takes around 14 months to set up the proper infrastructure, so he expects that to be delayed. And recreational or adult use marijuana is being challenged in court. In January, Governor Kristi Noem issued an executive order saying the state highway patrol superintendent can move forward with a lawsuit against recreational marijuana, which is an odd situation because the South Dakota Attorney General's office will be defending the voter-approved amendment. The South Dakota Supreme Court won't rule on the case until after the current legislative session, which ends on March 29th. Tom Hansen, KELO Land News.
Representative Derby says putting together the framework of regulation for legalized marijuana will probably require additional time. He says a special session of the legislature may be needed.
We have an update on that unusual car crash in northwest Iowa that we told you about last night. Check out this video from a surveillance camera. Now take a look at the top of your screen. You can see the headlights before the car vaults and then crashes into that rooftop. Fortunately, no one inside the house was in the house when it happened. The crash is still under investigation.
Nothing quite like that, thankfully, but several crashes this morning with a fresh snow and a little slick out there, Jay.
Yeah, Bridget. I was thinking an inch or two of snowfall. We ended up with 2 to 4 inches of snow. Even a little bit of lightning, and that when you see lightning, you know that your forecast is going to be on the low side. Here's what we have in Sioux Falls right now. The snow is obviously well done. The northwest winds continue to blow, not as strong as earlier, but it's chilly out there, 17, and our temperature's going to be dropping like a rock here this evening. Right now, we have the teens in the east on the fresh snowpack. Western South Dakota is in the 30s. They don't have any snow on the ground. Overnight tonight, we'll drop to the single digits here in the eastern part of KELO land. The northwest wind will actually help us from bottoming out, prevent us from bottoming out completely. Western South Dakota's nice lows will be the teens, and there could be some light snow in Rapid City. Then tomorrow, it's going to be about the same as today. Teens for highs in eastern KELO land, despite probably mostly sunny skies. The northwest wind will continue to blow, so we'll feel wind chilly, but nothing like we're going to see this weekend. We expect to see morning lows near or below 0 Saturday and Sunday, and afternoon highs only in the single digits at best. We'll have your weekend forecast in just a few minutes. Okay,
Despite the pressure from top Republican leaders to fall in line. Some of those Republicans were from South Florida, from the home of Parkland, Florida. Of course, that's where that massacre occurred at that high school in 2018, something that Marjorie Taylor Greene initially suggested was a false flag operation until today she said that those massacres actually took place. Those members, including Congressman Diaz-Balart, who's from South Florida, he voted against this resolution, voted for this resolution on the floor, joined with a couple of other South Florida Republicans. Now the question going forward is how does a Republican conference go from here? If you talk to people very close to Kevin McCarthy, the House Republican leader, they are happy this is done with. They believe that what the Democrats did in moving forward essentially took it off their plate. They could let the Democrats move forward to take her out of the committees, unite behind what they believe is an unfair process, and believe that would be enough to get their party united, get their party behind. Now they got Liz Cheney in her conference position and worry about their next confrontation going forward. But Aaron, as we know, it's not going to be that easy. A lot of questions remain, including from Senate Republicans who are very critical of the way the House Republican leadership dealt with this.
All right, thank you very much, Manu. And of course,
forget the politics altogether. Whatever they're doing in there is wrong.
The clip from inside Alfie Oaks' seed-to-table market, now seen more than 3 million times online.
You can see how absurd that it is that anyone's wearing masks, and how absurd that it is that we ever did any shutdowns in our country. It's the most absurd thing ever.
Why is it absurd when we see these hospitals with people teeming with COVID-19 patients?
So you see that on the news, but everyone asks yourself, how many people do you know that really have died of strictly only COVID, that didn't have other comorbidities?
While many people who die of COVID have other medical conditions, the CDC says that in 92% of COVID deaths, COVID-19 was the underlying cause. Oaks, known for his conservative and controversial positions, just had a federal lawsuit challenging the county mask mandate thrown out. Naples resident Kevin Tobler says it's a nuanced topic.
I don't want them telling me what to do, but public places where there's lots of people, you can't argue that that's responsible to wear a mask.
Experts agree masks do slow the spread.
People absolutely need to mask up, not just for themselves, but for their community.
But despite the science, one woman tweeting she believes it's a personal choice. Florida is doing it right. Americans need to take their life and their freedom back. A disconnect in Florida, still at the center of a national public health debate. Sam Brock, NBC News, Naples.
Yeah, that video garnering a lot of attention and a lot of conversation tonight. A dramatic vote by House Democrats to punish a Republican congresswoman over her past inflammatory comments. With that, here's Kristen Welker.
Tonight, House Democrats taking an unprecedented step, voting to strip freshman Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, a member of the opposing party, of her committee assignments after she embraced false QAnon conspiracy theories and was accused of promoting violence against Democrats. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi blasting Republicans for not taking action themselves.
I remain profoundly concerned about House Republicans' leadership acceptance of extreme conspiracy theorists.
Greene today saying she reposted QAnon conspiracy theories before she was elected, now saying it is misinformation she no longer believes.
I was allowed to believe things that weren't true, and I would ask questions about them and talk about them, and that is absolutely what I regret.
Greene, who has questioned whether 9/11 was real.
It's odd, there's never any evidence shown for a plane in the Pentagon.
Saying today,
I also want to tell you 9/11 absolutely happened. I do not believe that it's fake.
And after doubting the veracity of school shootings and taunting Parkland survivor David Hogg.
School shootings are absolutely real. One of my schoolmates brought guns to school and took our entire school hostage. And that happened right down the hall from my classroom. I know the fear that David Hogg had that day.
Reaction tonight in her Georgia district.
I'm for her 100%. I think she's a loony. I do.
Meanwhile, Democrats are demanding former President Trump testify at his impeachment trial. His lawyer telling us he won't, calling the request a publicity stunt. Lester.
Kristen Welker tonight, thank you. President Biden declared today that America is back to engaging with the world. It was his first foreign policy speech. Andrea Mitchell tells us more.
It's only a short drive to the State Department, but President Biden's visit was a signal diplomacy is back.
America cannot afford to be absent any longer on the world stage.
Changing Trump policy around the world. Challenging Vladimir Putin for jailing opposition leader Alexei Navalny.
The days of the United States rolling over in the face of Russia's aggressive actions, interfering with our elections, cyber attacks, poisoning its citizens are over.
Ending U.S. support for Saudi-backed forces battling Iranian-sponsored rebels in Yemen.
This war has to end.
Upholding human rights against authoritarianism in China and now Myanmar.
Force should never seek to overrule the will of the people or attempt to erase the outcome of a credible election.
and promising to rebuild a diverse workforce of career officers without White House interference.
This administration is going to empower you to do your jobs, not target or politicize you.
And after the attack on the Capitol, the president saying America can emerge better equipped to unite the world to defend democracy because we have fought for it ourselves. Lester?
All right, Andrea, thanks. And as you point out, one of the biggest issues with China is human rights. NBC's Keir Simmons now with our exclusive. Families saying China's government is tearing them apart.
Rayhan Assad's brother had been planning to attend her Harvard graduation in 2016.
I was in tears.
But he was suddenly arrested in China.
We haven't heard a word from him.
Rayhan and her brother are part of the Uyghur community, a Muslim minority group in China. 1 million Uyghurs have been locked up there in mass detention camps, human rights groups say. Now a senior Chinese government official, Xu Guishan, tells NBC News in a letter, Ekpar Assad has confessed to inciting secession and is sentenced to 15 years.
You believe that he was forced to confess?
He's been through more than I can even remotely imagine. I just can't fathom.
Last month, the United States accused China of genocide.
Genocide was committed against the Uyghurs.
In the same letter to us, Xu Guishan denies racial cleansing and calls reports of forced sterilization and birth control nonsense. We met him in late 2019 when we visited what China calls its vocational training camps. This mother, a widow, was only allowed to see her 4-year-old daughter once a week. Tell me that it isn't brutal to take a mother away from her 4-year-old daughter when her father has just died.
She can go home once a week.
Now, the same official tells us she has been released and is with her daughter and has a job. NBC News has not been able to verify that. In the letter, he writes, China's policy tackles terrorism and religious extremism. But Rayhan says her brother was no terrorist. China said it was closing its camps. Tonight, analysts tell us many have expanded. Lester?
All right, Keir, thanks very much. A former Ohio police officer was charged with murder in the shooting of an unarmed black man, Andre Hill. Ron Allen with more and a warning. The video is disturbing.
Police body cam video shows the moment former Columbus officer Adam Coy allegedly shot and killed Andre Hill in a friend's garage. A grand jury charging the 19-year police veteran with murder, assault, and dereliction of duty for not turning on his body camera until after opening fire.
Hands out to the side, now!
Once fully activated, the 60 seconds of video showing the shooting are recovered without audio. Today, Hill's family relieved but not fully satisfied.
Adam Coy messed with the wrong family, and his family is not backing down, and we are going to make sure that all 4 convictions happen.
Coy's attorney says the former officer is not guilty, and that Coy and Hill interacted before what's seen on the video without providing details. Police were responding to a neighbor's non-emergency call about a suspicious vehicle.
My client believed that there was a silver revolver in the right hand of Mr. Hill. And when it raised up, my client stepped back and yelled, gun, 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 and fired his weapon in what he believed was in defense of himself.
Investigators say Hill was not armed. Hill's family angry that he was handcuffed and that the video appears to show he was not given medical aid for more than 5 minutes.
When a white police officer is indicted for killing a black man, an unarmed black man, that does not translate into a conviction.
Coy, now in custody, expected to make his first appearance in court tomorrow. Ron Allen, NBC News.
In 60 seconds, the raging debate over reopening schools.
Welcome back to Dakota News. Attacks on intellectual property. He did not offer details. On Russia, Mr. Biden revealed an agreement to extend a nuclear arms treaty, but also offered this warning. Watch.
I made it clear to President Putin, in a manner very different from my predecessor, that the days of the United States rolling over in the face of Russia's aggressive actions, interfering with our elections, cyber attacks, poisoning its citizens, are over.
The president also directed Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin to review the global footprint of U.S. forces to make sure it's appropriate for national security. Biden also stopped the withdrawal of more than 9,000 U.S. troops from Germany. Former President Trump authorized pulling those troops out, saying Germany needs to pay more for its own defense. Meantime, President Biden announced an end to American support for offensive operations in Yemen, where Saudi-led forces are fighting the Iranian-backed Houthi rebels. Biden did say America will continue to help Saudi Arabia defend its sovereignty, and the president plans to increase the number of refugees admitted into the U.S. What?
Caucus. And the question now is, with 2 years, what can Democrats do to protect voting rights and deliver real tangible results for people?
Yeah, indeed. That is the essence of politics. Angela Rye, Charlie Sykes, Brandon Wolf, great panel. Thank you all very much. And coming up, much more on tonight's House vote to strip Marjorie Taylor Greene of her committee assignments, but she's still there in Congress. Plus a readout exclusive. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg joins me in his first interview since making history, sworn in yesterday as the nation's first openly gay cabinet secretary. And he has big plans. Mayor Pete is now Secretary Pete, and he's coming up. The readout continues after this.
Under Mr. Trump. 3 more of President Biden's cabinet nominees are headed to the full Senate for their confirmation. The Foreign Relations Committee endorsed Linda Thomas Greenfield today for ambassador to the United Nations. The Banking Committee approved Ohio Congresswoman Marcia Fudge to be Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and Cecilia Rouse to chair the Council of Economic Advisors. A second major voting systems firm, Smartmatic, is suing over claims that it helped to steal the election for President Biden. The suit seeks $2.7 billion from Fox News, 3 of its on-air hosts, and 2 former Trump lawyers, Sidney Powell and Rudy Giuliani. It alleges that they knowingly spread false information. Earlier, Dominion Voting Systems also sued Giuliani and Powell. A consulting firm, McKinsey & Company, has agreed to pay almost $600 million for boosting U.S. opioid sales as overdoses surged. Court documents showed McKinsey worked closely with Purdue Pharma to aggressively market more OxyContin. McKinsey says that it's reached agreements with every state except Nevada. And on Wall Street, some strong corporate earnings reports pushed the market higher. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 332 points to close at 31,055. The NASDAQ rose 167 points, and the S&P 500 added 41. Still to come on the News Hour, we examine the ongoing aftermath of arrest and accountability in the wake of the Capitol insurrection. A disconnect between supply and demand leads to frustration over the pace of vaccinations in Virginia. A new report outlines the potential future for the war in Afghanistan, and much more.
This is the PBS NewsHour from WETA Studios in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
1 month ago this Saturday, a mob of Americans stormed the U.S. Capitol in a failed attempt to deny Joe Biden's victory in the November election. The Department of Justice has arrested and charged rioters, and the Biden administration has launched a review of what it calls domestic violent extremism. Nick Schifrin provides an update on the criminal consequences so far and the threat that remains persistent. And then Yamiche Alcindor has a conversation on the country's seemingly cavernous political divide. Let's begin with Nick's report.
They broke through barricades, assaulted police, shattered windows, and once inside, destroyed and stole property. Over the past month, the Justice Department charged more than 180 rioters.
The scope and scale of this investigation in these cases are really unprecedented.
Michael Sherwin is acting U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia.
This is not going to be solved overnight. It's not going to be solved within the coming weeks. It's not going to be solved within the coming months.
With each new charge, there's a clearer picture of the diverse groups who attacked the Capitol. Longtime conspiracy theorists like self-proclaimed QAnon shaman who goes by Jake Angeli, as seen in this New Yorker video. Military veterans and law enforcement, including retired Lieutenant Colonel Larry Randall Brock Jr., who used a military term referring to information operations. Trump supporters who say they were swept into the crowd, like 22-year-old care worker Riley June Williams, seen here before she allegedly stole a laptop from Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office. And law enforcement says playing a key role, right-wing extremists. Video shows members of the militia, the Oath Keepers, and 4 January 6th indictments are for members of the Proud Boys, recently designated a terrorist group by Canada. They face charges including conspiracy, disorderly conduct, and obstructing or impeding an official proceeding, which carries a maximum penalty of 20 years.
Many of these groups were very explicit about their violent intentions.
Since the 90s, retired FBI Special Agent Michael German has tracked white supremacists and right-wing militias.
There is tremendous amount of public evidence that can be used even today to target the most violent actors. I am concerned that the FBI in particular and the Department of Justice are focusing on January 6th as if it was a sui generis event and not recognizing that many of these people had been engaging in violence around the country for months or years.
In Charlottesville in 2017, a neo-Nazi plowed his car through an anti-white supremacy protest, killing 1 woman. Most recently, at the Million MAGA March in Washington, D.C. in November, Proud Boys members brawled with counter-protesters. 1 man was stabbed. And another D.C. rally in December resulted in more clashes, multiple stabbings, and a couple dozen arrested.
All the signs were there that some of the supporters of Donald Trump were serious, they were dangerous.
Jane Holmoot was Deputy Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security under President Obama. She says even a decade ago, federal reports voicing concern about right-wing extremism were disparaged and their authors punished. Moot says that accelerated under President Trump.
People were reluctant to put out reports of the factors that we knew were coalescing to cause us great concern on January 6th. But no formal statement was issued. And the feeling that we hear is that it was not issued because when such things were stated publicly, that individuals paid with their careers.
This was repeated activity that was not being addressed by law enforcement, which conditioned these groups to believe that this was okay. This was something they could do, which attracts more violent people who just want to commit violence, and here's a place they can do it and actually get a pat on the back rather than handcuffs.
What consequences have...
And I really started to realize how special our system is and how unique it is, but also how fragile it is. So the thing about rule of law is you don't choose...
Charged for the death of Capitol Police Officer Brian Sicknick, who lied in honor at the Capitol this week.
There is a definition of domestic terrorism, but perhaps surprisingly to many of us, it doesn't carry any criminal penalties. And so if you're charging individuals who are intent on violence, law enforcement is having to use, as you say, other statutes and other provisions. But, they all say the wheels of justice grind slowly, but they grind, and that's what's happening here.
Germans.
States is misspelled on the very first page. Okay, United States. This is, some people may say, okay, why would you bring something up like that? It's petty. It is the word United States. It is in the defense of a former president in an impeachment trial. It is not a small thing. What does this tell you?
Well, typos are never career-enhancing moves for lawyers, especially not in important briefs like this in the 5th typewritten line. And so what it tells you is Donald Trump is going to look around and say, who did I hire that these guys can't get the spellings right? And the Republican senators are going to sort of question the lawyers in whom Donald Trump has placed his faith. So it is a small...
And warning that extremists could continue to mobilize to incite or commit violence.
Is there still an ongoing threat moving forward?
It's the same as the threat that existed on January 5th, 2021. Or 10 years before that, or 10 years before that. These groups are persistently violent against communities that don't have the kind of public platform that members of Congress have, right? So it's important now that their attention is focused on it, that we actually understand how this impacts all segments of our society, not just the powerful.
And so today, the concern is not if, but when extremists will plan another violent event, and if law enforcement can prevent it. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Nick Schiffer.
Now we take a deeper look at where we as a country go in the aftermath of the Capitol attack, and we look at where Americans go who are still distrustful of the 2020 election despite it being free and fair. For that, I'm joined by Ann Applebaum. She's a staff writer at The Atlantic. Thanks so much for being here, Ann. What more do we know about the people who stormed the Capitol, and how does that group fit into the larger group of people who supported President Trump?
So to be clear, all of the people who supported President Trump didn't support the storming of the Capitol, and certainly not all Republicans did, and not all conservatives did. I think what we're talking about is a more defined group, the people who were there and the people who still say they support him, which, according to one poll that was done soon afterwards, is about 20% of the country. Even if it's 10%, even if that's an exaggeration, it's a very large number of people. And what's important about this group is these are people who no longer accept the rules of American democracy. When they were attacking Congress, they weren't Republicans attacking Democrats. They were attacking the institution of Congress itself. They were trying to prevent it from Congress from certifying the winner of the presidential election. So that means they are now a group of people who are de facto outside of politics. They're an anti-systemic group. You can call them seditionists, you can call them insurgents, but they are no longer part of the American political system.
You call them seditionists, and you say they're no longer part of the American system. I wonder what role you think social media and the many ways that we communicate plays in this, as well as how do we combat and how do we as a country combat disinformation using all of those different mediums?
Social media accelerates and exaggerates trends that already exist. And of course, one of the functions that it now is that it now enables you or me or anyone or this group of people to live in a completely separate world from everyone else. So you can live in a world where all the news that you get and all the information that you see and all the things that your friends are sharing with you all confirm and things that are according to your point of view.
Forget you're worried. Domestic, not essentially. We had a domestic terrorist attack inside our country, and it's led by a guy named Donald Trump.
Discovery Plus. Stream what you love.